Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer, and I'm your host. We're so glad to be coming to you live today from Nashville, Tennessee, right here at Thistle Farms. And I've got two very special guests here. We're interviewing CEO Hal Cato and Senior Ambassador of Community Relations, Dorris Walker. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
It's so awesome to be here with you both today. Really excited. Last year when we started this podcast, I had no idea where it would go, where we would end up, let alone that I'd be here today getting to interview you both. All I knew is that in the midst of such chaos and unknown territory, we needed to provide hope in a time that felt so hopeless. Which I know is very familiar to you all in the mission here at Thistle Farms, as you've been a light for so many in a time of darkness. So, Hal, I wanted to ask you first to share the history of Thistle Farms for us.
Okay, well, it's a long one, so I'll try to keep it condensed. But Thistle Farms actually started as an idea almost 25 years ago. Becca Stevens, who's a young Episcopal priest, grew up here in Nashville at the time and was doing a lot of work as a student, working with women coming in and out of halfway houses and working in different soup kitchen feeding programs, and just knew that the model as it existed was broken, that for the most part, the halfway house model, as it was set up specifically for women survivors, just wasn't working. It didn't give them the time, the space, the support that they needed to really heal. So she decided she wanted to turn the model on its head. And rather than looking at women as clients who need to come in and be, treated, I want to create a community where folks come in and heal together. And so started with one house and 4 women, no authority living in the house. They came together to hold each other accountable, to set the rules, and to be each other's, support system. And everybody thought it was crazy. Who does that? But the model worked. And word started spreading, and women were healing, and board decided to buy another home and then another home and add more and more positions, and women were getting their lives back, and they were going out finding their sisters on the street or who were in jail and saying, hey, look at me, you can be next, and bringing them in. And it just kind of snowballed from there. After a few years in, what everybody saw is that the women were doing incredibly well. They were healing, they were getting clean and sober, making restitution with the courts, getting their kids back, but no one would hire them because of their limited work and education background. So Magdalene, which was known at the time, started a cottage industry. Nobody called it a social enterprise then. Nobody knew what that was, a cottage industry, making soaps and candles in a church kitchen, just to give extra hours for a few women a week, allow them to earn a little bit of income, as well as it was an amazing way to spread the word. When you can meet with somebody, give them a candle and say this was hand poured by a survivor. And then that's when it really took off and eventually became known as Thistle Farms. And now, we've grown into the largest enterprise in the country employing women survivors. We have homes in 59 cities as part of our national network, including the 6 homes, soon to be 7, that we have here in Nashville. So it's a beautiful story that just started with a crazy dream, and every single day we go after another crazy dream. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you provide some insight into the meaning behind the name for Thistle Farms?
Oh, I'd love to. That's my favorite thing to talk about, because most people have no idea. As a matter of fact, most people think we are a farm, and it's funny when you see volunteers pull up and they got their jeans and their boots and they're going to go work on a farm, and they look around and we're sitting here in the middle of Nashville. But the name itself comes from, it's named after the only flower that grows up through concrete and along chain link fences in the streets and underpasses where women who are just trapped in that web of addiction, homelessness, trafficking, prostitution, live and sleep. And many of them will tell you that would be the only thing that they might see bloom. What's the thistle? And so it has a special meaning here. And a lot of people, if you Google thistle, it'll call it a noxious weed, which honestly, a lot of people considered the women that we were initially working with noxious weeds as well. But you can't kill it. I mean, you can chop a thistle down and it'll grow back up even stronger. And everything about it symbolizes who we are. And it's almost like there's sacred flowers around here. If a thistle grows up, along the side of the building and the yard people are going to cut it down, everybody loses their mind because that's our symbol. But it's so powerful.
Indeed, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, one thing I've heard you say before is to keep your eyes on the end goal, to help heal and employ survivors. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that means to you and the mission of Thistle Farms?
Yeah, so, you walk into Thistle Farms and you see a beautiful cafe and you see a store full of products and you see people coming and going and lines and everybody, it's really beautiful and we're so proud of it. But honestly, the reason, we're not running a cafe or making products because we love, to serve people or to make candles or any of the things that we make. We do that. That's just our what. The why is the jobs that it creates, the income it creates, and just that the community that it sustains. So that is the end goal. It's not how many lavender candles did we sell. It's how many hours were women employed. Or, how much did they bring home? What were they able to do with that money? Who else were they able to bring back in? So that's our why. It's not candles and cafes.
That's beautiful. When we talk about the why, it leads me into the next thing people get here, how do they arrive? And so much of that is surrounded by the aspect of asking for help. So, we've talked about your mission, how it was established and what have you, something that we do at Promises so often and focus on is answering the questions and answering the call for help when people ask for it. And that's something that I definitely see y'all did in the early days and continue to do in the lives of the women that you're helping to save. So, which leads me to my next question for you, Dorris. Can you share with us a little bit about the trajectory of your life and the timeline with when you came into the fold at Thistle and how that happened?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So when I came into Thistle Farms, I was broken and I was tired, and I had just about lost my will to live because I had been in my addiction for well over 26 years. And I had been on the streets for well over 20 years. You see, women come into the Thistle Farms community for all sorts of reasons. There are some women who come into this community because they were sold into human trafficking at a very early age. And in the beginning, that wasn't part of my story. And then there are some women who come into our community because they grew up in homes where addiction was prevalent, and they thought that was an okay way of life. There are some women who come in because they were touched by a family member or a stranger, and that molestation, that trauma started in their lives. And the thing for me was my life was different in the beginning. So I thought I had an amazing childhood versus some of the other ladies didn't have a great childhood, but I still landed right here at Thistle Farms with the rest of my sisters. And that's because at the age of 12, I was a witness to my father's murder. So that childhood trauma in a little bitty town like White House, Tennessee, where nothing like that ever happened. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced violence. That's the first time I'd ever seen a gun. And that was just totally different from anything that I had ever seen. So immediately, I can remember going into denial. My dad died that day. My mom was severely injured, and everything about my life changed immediately. And I would sit in the classroom and I would listen to the teacher, but then my mind would wander back to that same scene. So it was like when my mom started working and being the breadwinner, I started hanging out with the cool kids at school. So I found myself having a childhood addiction to marijuana at the age of 13. that addiction quickly progressed. And by the time I was an adult, I had a full-blown cocaine addiction because for me, marijuana was a gateway drug. And once it stopped doing what I needed it to do, I started looking for something a little harder. I was trying to find a way to find peace. And I thought by keeping myself inebriated, I could find peace, but that was not the answer. So I found myself going all the way from the little small town of White House, Tennessee, all the way to Nashville. And when I got to Nashville, I began to live a truly inhumane lifestyle. I can remember walking down the streets of Nashville, and I would trade myself as though I was some type of a commodity. But I remember that my mom and my dad were humble believers in God, and they taught me all there was to know about the Word of God. So I would be too high to even form a prayer. But I would walk down the middle of the street and recite the 23rd Psalm. And I would cry out, and like the end of the 23rd Psalm says, I would dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I would cry out and I would say, if you would just please come get me, I promise you, I'll dwell in your house forever. When I was on the street, I had a friend named Regina. And Regina had disappeared, and I thought she was dead because our lives did not hold any value on the street. So I went to jail again because my life was full of going to jail and getting out of jail and it was just the same vicious cycle. So when I went to jail this time, I was sitting there, and I always like to make a comparison with Thistle Farms and jail, because when you go to jail, they take your clothes, they put you in this ugly orange jumpsuit, and it's like that place is designed to make you feel worse about yourself. And that place is designed to just crush your spirit. But when I found Thistle Farms is the total opposite. It is made to uplift you. And they do everything they can here to put you back together. And they do everything to give you that empowerment that you need. So I was sitting there in jail one day, and I looked up, and across the room, I thought I recognized this girl, and I thought, is that Regina? And I thought, no, that can't be Regina, because this girl was glowing from the inside out. And Regina turned around with a big smile, and she said, Dorris, guess what? I got my life back. And I'm like, how did you do that? She said, I found this program. And I said, no, I can't do that. I have gone to so many 30-day programs. But what was 30 days going to do for me when I had been addicted the vast majority of my life at that point? And she said, no, Dorris, this is a long-term program. And I said, I can't do it, Regina. I've gone to halfway houses. And halfway houses charge between $125 and $140 a week. And at that time in my life, the only way I knew how to make money was to go back out on the street, trade myself as though I was some type of a commodity. And I wasn't using drugs, but I'm still living dirty. So I would feel so bad about myself that I'd go back and use again. She said, Doris, this program, and she was talking about Thistle Farms. At that time, it was called Magdalene. She said, this program is designed for women just like us. She said, all the women that come into the program are survivors of human trafficking, prostitution, addiction, abuse, or trauma. She said, so that's your place, and they don't charge you a dime. And I'm like, really? So she gave me the number. Usually when I got out of jail, I would go right back to the street because I didn't know any other way to live. But this time when I got out of jail, I went all the way back to White House, Tennessee. By this time in my life, I had been addicted about 18 years. And I had been on the streets about 18 years. And when I got there, my mom was taking care of my children because I couldn't take care of myself. And I came in and I was tired, and my kids were there. And they ran up to their mama and they hugged me. And it did not matter that I probably smelled like a bear, but they just loved their mom. So I came in the house and I went in my room where I grew up as a child. And home was not a safe place for me because if I sat down on the bed where I grew up and I looked right out the window, I could see the very spot where my dad died outside. So home was not a good place for me. My mom had a picture of my daughter on my bedroom wall, so I took that picture down and I scribbled that number on the back of it that Regina gave me, and I put that picture back up there. And then I thought, now that number's safe because everything I touched turned to dirt. So I stayed there a few days, but I was having using dreams every night. And if anybody that don't do drugs would know, anybody that does drugs would know that if you are addicted to any type of substance, when you go to sleep at night, all night long, you're dreaming that you're using. And I wake up in a hot sweat. So I thought, I'm going back. I can't live this way. So when I was there, my brother said, Doris, you know what? You are killing our mom. Every time the news come on and there's a woman found dead and she doesn't have any identification, our mom goes into a panic mode because she thinks it's you. Could you just call our mom and let her know that you're doing okay? And I'm like, yeah. It didn't bother me because the drugs had did just what I wanted it to do. It had took the pain away. But the drugs had done exactly what I didn't want it to do. It had taken me away. So I didn't have any feelings and I didn't care. So I returned to the street. But when I got back on the street this time, nothing was the same. I would be sitting in a nasty, dirty crack house, and something in my spirit would say, hey, Doris, call your mom. And I'm like, I would be walking down the street about to open a car door to a stranger and trade myself again as though I was some type of a commodity. And something in my spirit would say, call your mom. So finally one day, I hadn't been home in about almost a year, in about 10 months. So one day I thought, okay, I'm gonna call her because this just kept after me. So I called my mom and I said, hey mom, this is Doris, just wanted you to know I was doing okay, and I was not doing okay. She said, Doris, she said, you know the songs that your dad taught you as a child and the songs that I know you can sing, we're having this big anniversary, we want you to come back and be a part of it. And I'm like, okay mom, I will. So I went back. And I thank God every day of my life that I made that call. So I went back home. But when I got home this time, I was broken. I had bruises on the bottom of my feet. I was bruised from the inside out. And I had just about lost my will to live. Everything I touched fell apart. And I couldn't do anything right. And I was so tired of living the life I was living. So I came to my mom's house and I just collapsed on the bed. And I slept more safe and more sound than I had slept in a couple of decades. Because on the street, you're always thinking you're gonna die. And on the street, you're always scared and there's always fear. So I woke up the next morning, and I remember as a child, my mom used to always walk around the house and sing hymn praises. And she used to always be in prayer. So I woke up the next morning and I could hear my mom out in the kitchen. And she was like, God, my baby's home. Don't let her go back this time. And my mom would always sing little hymns like, oh, Lord, I want you to help me. And then she'd come in my room and she would feed me. So I would get up in the afternoons and I would walk up to the church and I would rehearse. Now, the people that was at the church were the same people that I grew up with. But now they were mothers and they were fathers and they were healthy members of society. And they looked at me and they couldn't recognize me. And they just hug on me and they would love on me. And they say, hey, Doris, we got this song we want you to sing. It's this song by Lemmy Battles, Chicago Mass Choir. And it's called, You're Looking at a Miracle. And I'm like, really, y'all? Really? I don't look like a miracle. I don't feel like a miracle. I can't sing. They say, yes, you can, Doris. You can sing it. So all day long, I would sit on my bed and I would try to sing this song. Every time you look at me, you're looking at a miracle. And I'm thinking, I can't get this. So I just kept trying. So then I looked up one day and I thought, oh, that book, that's that paper. So I looked up and I got the picture off the wall and I called Regina. And I said, hey, Regina, this is Doris. Remember that program you told me about? Can I come? She said, Doris, we have over 150 women on the waiting list. But because you're my friend, I'm going to talk to the director. And no matter what you do, even if you leave your mom's house and you go back to the street, just keep calling us. I promise you I'll get you in. That gave me a little bit of hope. And that's the first time I had had any hope in my life in a couple of decades. So we had the anniversary and I sang and I praised and I did all the things that I came home to do. So I woke up the next morning and I thought, well, I've done what I came to do. I'm just going back to the street because I don't know any way to live because every night I'm having using dreams. So this particular morning, my mom was out in the kitchen and she was praying harder than I've ever heard anybody pray in their lives. And she's like, God, I mean it. I need you to let my daughter stay here. Don't let my daughter go back to the street. And she was actually singing to the top of her voice. And she was singing and praying so hard that you could feel the vibrations on the windows. And she was like, oh, Lord, I want you to help me. And she came around the corner. And usually when I come home, I'm able to stay home for a few weeks. And my mom would send me to the store and I'd take part of the money. And then when I gathered enough money and when I'd slept enough, I was ready to go back to the street. So usually I could call somebody and they'd rush and come get me. So that particular morning, the first person I called didn't have enough gas to come get me. The next person I called had a flat tire. And I'm like, what's going on? So then I started calling and I started leaving messages. I'm panicking now because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? I've been without drugs 2 weeks and I'm ready to go back to the street. I did what she asked me to do. So my mom came around the corner and I was putting my clothes in the bag. And she said, Doris, where are you going? And I said, Mom, I'm going back. I did what you asked me to do. And she said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going back. And she had tears running down her face. And if I had been in my right mind, that would have stopped me. But nothing could stop me when I wanted drugs. So I'm thinking, somebody's got to call me. So the phone rang, and I thought, good, somebody's coming to get me. So I picked the phone up, and I said, hello, you coming to get me? It was Regina. And she said, yeah, Doris, I'm coming to get you. So I will never forget that on Monday, November the 9th, 2009, I got my life back. And I'm crying, but I'm crying tears of joy because I got my life back. And I came into the Thistle Farms community, and it was like the calm after the storm. And when I walked into the house, it was a beautiful house. And I've heard Becca Stevens say that they build the houses with intention, luxury, and lavishly. And they build the houses like most churches build organs. And it's a beautiful place. So when I walked in, there was a young girl sitting there, and I said, hey, how is it here? And she said, Doris, because I knew her from the street. Her name was Sonia. She said, Doris, she says, some days are better than others, but just stick and stay. And I bore those words in my spirit, and I have stuck around, and I have stayed for 11 years. So I've got my life back. And so now I get to serve as a community ambassador, and I get to tell my story, and I get to help the next woman find her way. So it's worth it. Everything that I went through, it is worth it because I've got my life back. So I'm grateful. Is that what you asked me? Yeah. Is that what you asked me? Yeah, I got my life back. Yeah, so I got it back. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
You're a beautiful inspiration.
Well, thank you.
Sitting before us today.
Yeah, it was my eyelashes.
You know, you shared something.
Yeah.
You shared something with me earlier today about surrender, and it was so powerful. I just want to ask you to share that again. What you experienced, what you thought it was, and what.
Yes. So you know, if you were to Google surrender, you'll see surrender means to give up, to just, to give into authority, just to lose. I thought surrender meant to lose. But when I finally surrendered and came in, I didn't lose anything. I gained everything. So I thought surrender meant to lose. Surrender meant to win, because I'm old. I have been living more in these past 11 years than I did the first 54. So I'm 65 years old, and I spent the vast majority of my life in my addiction. But now I am so glad that I got here, and I have been able to travel around the world, around the United States and out of the country after being trapped in a 10-block radius for well over 26 years. So when they was teaching me that song, "You're Looking at a Miracle," you truly are looking at a miracle. And I'm just not the only miracle. Every woman that walks through that door, it's a miracle that we get our lives back. But there are a lot of women who don't get their lives back. There are a lot of women who lose their lives. And that kind of reminds me of how we celebrate the women here. So So every year we have this big celebration and a graduation for the women. So last year, because of COVID, we couldn't celebrate the way we usually do. We usually go into St. Bartholomew's or somewhere and we'll celebrate. But last year, because of COVID, the only thing that they could come up to do, and it's not the only thing, but when you hear the story, so they got volunteers who are amazing in our community. Volunteers came in with their convertible drop-back tops, and the women got on the cars, and they would have a parade, and they went down the alleyway. And I didn't get to see it because my pastor had passed. But when I came back and I saw that video of women celebrating in this alleyway in the Thistle Road crossing, I was amazed, because alleys are not where we celebrate. Alleyways are where we lost our lives. Alleyways are where we lost our hopes and our dreams. But now, when we get here, old dreams awaken and new possibilities arrive, and we get our lives back, and we get them back in a mighty way. We just don't come to work and learn how to make candles. We come to work and we find ourselves. We come to work and we find sisters, and we bond together, and we become sisters for life. Yeah, it's amazing.
It is.
Amazing. It is.
I knew I was going to tear up when we were talking today, but that's just part of it. So with it being Mental Health Month, I want to ask you, as far as Thistle Farms is concerned, people come in, just like you said, women and suffering from addiction and all types of traumatic experiences that have tormented their lives. And I'm sure coupled with mental health issues. So what are some ways that Thistle Farms helps to aid in that healing and recovery process?
Okay, so when we come in the program, Broken and Tired, they help us in every area of our lives. So there are some women who come in with trauma. All of us come in with some type of trauma. I came in with all these excessive fears, and I had a lot of phobias. There are some women who come in, and so I can't speak on now, but when I came in 2009, we partnered with this Elam, part of Meharry Hospital, and when they would diagnose the women to see what type of treatment they need, they would find out that they were dual diagnosed, and some people would be bipolar, or some people would have more going on than they thought they did, because we have induced our bodies with drugs over and over again, and we haven't taken care of ourselves, and we've been raped, and we've been abused, and we've been treated inhumanely for so long. So it is impossible. It is a miracle that we made it through it alive. But when we come in, Thistle Farms puts us back together again in so many ways. They sent me, the thing that works here is that, especially because it's a 2-year program and it don't cost us anything, every woman's plan is her own individual plan. So for me, I needed to go to the sexual assault center. So that's where I got my healing. The next woman may have needed to go to some other type of center. Some may have needed to go because of bipolar, or some of, I've got a good friend who come to work here, and she's amazing. She's a rock star. She's amazing, but she battles with the mental issue. So when she's doing good, she's at the top. But when she falls hard. But she always get back up. And I just pray for her safety. So, we have like Mental Health Co-op was one of the people that used to work with us. So we had different partners all around the city. Like when I came in, I had 11 and a half teeth. It was not a good look. The half tooth was right in front. It was, it was not a good look. But they sent me to Interfaith Dental, and I got my teeth. And all this is a gift. Every bit of it is a gift. The only thing they ask of me is to just try to stay clean and get your life back. Just be still. Just be still, and we will do the rest. And that's what they done for us. That's what they do. Yes.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
I can truly say I've never heard of another organization that does all of this.
I haven't either. And the thing about it, it was so hidden, because my last area of town using was on this side of town, West Nashville, and one of our houses was on the same street, and I would go buy drugs. And the dealers would say, so when you get up there by the big house, be really quiet. They didn't want, and that's where my help was, but nobody was telling me. So I just thought, okay, there's a big house, so be really quiet, hide your drugs. That was the place when I should have said, come get me. And they would have, because there are girls who have come in because they were walking in front of that house and they were hungry, and they offered them a bag of chips, and then they came into the program and got their lives back. Yeah, so,
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing.
it is.
So Doris, when you are talking to somebody who's on the fence of surrender, of throwing their arms up and saying, I need help, is there a person or a story that comes to mind that you pull from or share with that individual in those times?
Yeah, there are so many stories that come to mind. I won't call names, but I will say that every woman that walks through the doors here has a story. So if you're trying to decide whether to stay in your misery or to come out, it is the difference between day and night. It's like all the chaos that goes on with a storm and the screaming and the running and thinking you're gonna die. And when you get here, like as a matter of fact, when I got here, I was up all the time. I never slept because I was always on a hustle. I never slept. But my first night at Thistle, in the program, I woke up and I heard the birds chirping. And I hadn't heard the birds in a couple of decades. And I'm sure they were there, but my mind was not quiet enough. So I would say to anybody that was on the fence, we get our lives back and we become whole. And I wish that I had done it. I was old. I'm older now, but I was 54 when I came in the program. So I had spent the vast majority of my life. But just come in and give it a try. And I promise if you give this side a try, you're not going to go back because you're going to be like, oh my goodness, look here. Yeah. So everything about me looked different. I would look at my hands, and my hands would remind me of that story in the Bible about the withered hand. So the hands were withered, and he said, stretch out thy hands and go forth. Thistle Farms tell us to dream and dream big. And that's what we get to do around here. So if you are battling back and forth with it, just know it's never going to get any better out there. But it's always going to get better on this side. It's always going to get better on this side.
You know, it's interesting, your answer to that question, because when we were preparing this, I was thinking about what my answer would be as a person in recovery myself. And I've worked in the field almost as long as you've, been doing the same. And I can't say that there's one person that I would point to or one story, because like you said, there's so many differences. My personal story was I got sober and was fortunate enough to be one of the people that got sober and stayed sober the first time. But that's a rarity, and usually you never hear of that. The people and the stories that I love to share and love that I get to do, just like we're doing right now, providing the platform of sharing recovery stories, are stories like yours. We were talking earlier about how you didn't give up. You had been through countless 30-day treatment programs, halfway houses, had all but lost hope, and you kept going. You didn't know, what would come next, but you put one foot in front of the other. And at that point that you finally achieved that surrender was when things turned over. So for me, one of the most powerful things is getting to relay stories like yours of the beacons of hope. Yes. That just because you've been through 5, 10, 15 treatment episodes, it does not mean you're a failure, or that treatment doesn't work, or that recovery doesn't work, or that you're lost from hope. So, for that, I am so grateful for the fact that you're choosing to live, all of us are, choosing to live our story of recovery from addiction out loud instead of in silence. Because of that, so many people will not have to suffer in silence themselves.
That's true. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. That means a lot.
Absolutely. So Hal, I don't want to leave you out. Is there a story that comes to mind when you're talking to somebody, one of the women here, or potentially coming in that inspires you?
There are hundreds. I can't pick, honestly, I cannot pick one. For me, the most amazing ones are, because, let's be honest, being a male, being a white male, it can just be triggering in and of itself at a place like Thistle Farms, you know. So, and I was really terrified of taking the job when it was offered to me, because I'm like, how are they going to accept I'm a guy in charge? And for me, that day that I know that I've earned a woman's trust is the day that I, it makes it all worthwhile, because they have no reason to trust me. And they majority of them come in, they won't even make eye contact. I'm an authority figure, trigger one, I'm a guy, trigger two, just, so when I see them come in and they cannot look at me, they cannot say a word, they just keep their head down. And then by the end of that 2 years, when we're high-fiving each other on the back of a convertible as they're being paraded down an alley and celebrated, and those are the stories that mean the most to me. And every single woman has her own story. I've also got a lot of heartbreaking stories. I had a woman dear to me, who just went back out 2 weeks ago. And I don't think she'll make it back, I really don't. But I'm so grateful to Dorris and Regina and Katrina and Ty. I could go on and on and on for the lights that they hold up and how they just keep us going and keep me learning something every single day about recovery and relapse and second chances and third chances and fourth chances, and we give fifth and sixth. I mean, we go on and on, and it's amazing. Some of our most powerful survivor leaders here, first time didn't go so well for them. They went back out there, and then they came back. They went back out there and ended up in jail, sometimes years. And we picked them up and brought them back in there. So, yeah, there's no linear pathway for anybody.
That is really awesome. So I want to transition here to talk a little bit about something we're doing at Promises. We're talking about your mission and just so many wonderful things that have happened in the trajectory of Thistle Farms. We have shifted our focus in midst of the pandemic and answering the call to all the things that people suffer from. We have seen a need to approach things differently as well. That 28-day, 30-day treatment isn't necessarily the end-all be-all for everybody. And so we're starting a program called PATH, that stands for Providing Access to Hope, and is coming out here in Nashville at the end of May, and is essentially a one-stop shop for somebody who is curious about whether or not they need help, whether or not their problem is truly interfering with their life. They don't know where to start, but they know that something is off. They can go there and get access to resources for day programming, IOP, medication-assisted therapy, and we're really excited about that rolling out here soon. So, especially in right around the ending of Mental Health Month, it'll be coming out. So we're really excited to celebrate that. So, talking about new endeavors, what's to come in the future? Can you share with us for Thistle Farms what's on the horizon for you all?
A lot. We're born from a creative dream, and every single day we just keep reliving it. So a couple things. We're getting ready to break ground on another home to expand the program capacity, add 8 more women, which is a big deal. We haven't added a brand new home in many, many years, so I'm excited we finally get to do that. We're also investing in affordable housing for graduates so that they have the opportunity when they complete the program to move into a brand new, beautiful place where they can be excited to go home to and feel safe to go home to. Nashville's getting more and more and more expensive, and so our graduates just having a really hard time. So doing something about that. Our national network continues to expand, and so we're putting a lot of emphasis on that. We're also going to be opening this August an office in Washington, D.C., and we've hired a director of public policy and advocacy who's a trafficking survivor herself, who will be moving to D.C. to lead our public policy and advocacy initiatives. We have over 250,000 people now between email and social followers. It's a lot of stakeholders who probably want to do more than buy soap.
Yep.
You know, and so giving them ways to take action and to help address bad corporate policy, bad public policy, things that prohibit women from really living their best life. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm excited to see where all that leads and all the goodness that comes from it. Yeah. Dorris, I know in your line of what you do for Thistle Farms, you have your finger on the pulse of a lot in the community and what have you, especially here in the Middle Tennessee area. Do you have any insight that you'd like to share about what we can do as a community to break the stigma of mental health issues and increase access to resources for people that are suffering and struggling?
Right. So as far as breaking the stigma behind it, people actually think, there's the one thing that Becca Stevens has pointed out, that every woman that comes to this door has the same thing. Every woman between the age of 7 and 11 has been raped. And so there are a lot of 13-year-old, what people call crack whores, and there are no 13-year-old crack whores. There are people who the system has let them down in some way, and they're out there. So we need to think that no woman, as a little girl, says, when I grow up, I want to be on the street. I want to be a prostitute. I want to sell myself. So the stigma behind seeing a woman on the street and think she's there because she wants to be, or seeing a man on the street and thinking he's there because that's what he wants to do with his life. So if we can get those stigmatism to go away and see that those are actually people, look them in their eye. Just don't look at their clothes and think, oh my God. Look at them. Let them know that you see them, because they need to be seen. They need to be heard. And you would be surprised that most of the people that come in, when I went to jail, I've met some of the most brilliant people in jail, because people they really are regular folks that stuff happens to, and they just fall through the cracks. So, as far as the mental health thing, it's that I can't compare anybody's to Thistle Farms, because they just cover everything for us. Anything that we, even after we're graduates and we have a hard time and we lose a loved one or anything in our life happens, they'll send us back to therapy, even as a graduate. So they just broke the mold. I have to say, Thistle Farms broke the mold, but just let people know that find a way to send people to therapy and help folks, even if they don't have the insurance, or even if they can't afford it. If they can't afford it, it would be a great investment to help somebody to work through their problems. Yeah, it'd be a great investment. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so we're almost out of time, and to close out our interview, I'm doing this with each of our guests, all of our segments during Mental Health Month, and I want to ask y'all 3 rapid-fire questions. And Dorris, I'm going to start with you. So, what book or movie did you just get through that you loved so much you immediately had to share with a friend?
So the book that I've actually been reading here lately, and it's an old book, but it's really an old book, but I had never read it before. I did an interview with this lady in New York, and she had wrote a book about, yes, you can find the answers. So it was a book, her name was Beth. Sorry, I can't remember her last name. But I read that book, and it was such an amazing book that I told some of the girls about it. And it was just like, yes, you can find the answer. So I occasionally tell people that I'm a Googleologist, because when I want to know something, I just Google it. It's just Google it. And I didn't realize that it was like at my fingertips just to find out anything. So I really love the fact that I can figure stuff out for myself. If I don't have the knowledge about it, I'll try to figure it out. And then if I can't, I'm not ashamed to go ask somebody to help me. Yeah.
Love that. All right, Hal.
You know what? I just reread one that I fell in love with this book a long time ago, and I kind of forgot about it. And it's going to sound very serious, but it's called Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen. And 2020 and COVID was really tough for me. I had a really, really hard time. And for some reason, this book just popped into my mind, and I read it, and it's all about Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son, and it walks you through each character, and it puts you in each character, and it's a transformative book.
Interesting. Very cool. All right, so next, Dorris, what ordinary peaceful moment in life makes you take a deep breath and feel centered?
When I wake up in the morning and I realize that I'm awake and I'm in my right mind, that is the best feeling in the world. I wake up and there's no something telling me, go get it, you gotta go, you gotta do this, go sell yourself. I don't have any of that anymore. So when I wake up in the morning, every single day of my life, I thank you, God, for waking me up this morning in my right mind. So that's such a great feeling for me, because I didn't have that for a long time. So yeah, that's it.
I can identify with
You
that.
can do yeah. Just waking up. Yeah.
All right, Hal, what about you?
What keeps me, my moment that keeps me centered?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's cooking.
Okay, yeah.
For me, I love to cook. It's one of the few things I can do in my life where there's a beginning and an end, and there's some immediate gratification to it. So that's my
Good.
thing.
All right, so what's something, Dorris, that you wish everyone knew about mental health care?
That it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a part of life. And if you go through the mental health care with someone helping you, you will come out on the other side. You will come out on the other side far better than you were. You won't be miserable. It's like, it's not a stigma. It's okay to say it, tell it. It's okay to speak up and say it. It really is, yeah. It is.
Yeah, same. That is the single greatest gift you can give yourself and those who love you.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody could have said that better, so
Really?
I would have said
Yeah.
same too.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's it.
So, oh my gosh, this has just been so wonderful. A really, really great time. And I just want to thank you both for being such a pillar in the community and for your time today, for your vulnerability and sharing today. And I know I can speak for the rest of our Promises family that we're just so grateful to have you both doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been fun.
It has been. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. Thank you. And I'm so glad to get to meet you.
You too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I want to mention, for those of you who are tuning in that may not be familiar with Thistle Farms' mission and what's available, we were referencing earlier the women here get employed and learn tools for employment to do many different things, and they produce lots of products that are awesome. I have so many of them, and I'm going to go buy some here right after this for Mother's Day, some gifts. And if you want to check them out, you can go to their website, which is www.thistlefarms.org. If you'd like to check out any more of the recovery stories, I'd encourage you to do so. You can online at Facebook. Go to @RootedPromises or on our YouTube channel, which is also @RootedPromises. And so thanks again for all of you watching. I hope you've been encouraged today. And with that, we are out.